Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 3rd Maccabees, the 4th chapter. Now, as we read in the 3rd chapter, Ptolemy basically sent out this letter decreeing that anybody who was sheltering any Jews would be basically punished harshly, and that all in his estate were to find and round up any Jews around him and bring them for punishment. So, chapter 4. Wherever this decree was read, a feast was arranged for the Gentiles at public expense, with shouts of joy. So when this letter got to, all the different parts of his estate, all of them they basically started to rejoice, started partying, at hearing this, because they were enemies of the Jews. Their deep, long-standing hatred was now openly being revealed. But among the Jews, there were constant grief, lament, and crying. Everywhere their hearts were on fire as they groaned and bewailed the unexpected destruction that the king had suddenly inflicted on them. What district or city, or what inhabited place of any kind, or what streets weren't filled with grieving and weeping for them? They were being sent off together by the generals in every city in a merciless and cruel manner. At the sight of these unusual punishments, even some of the Jews' enemies wept over their most miserable expulsion, for they saw their pitiable state and reflected on the uncertain outcome of life. So even some of the enemies, these heathens and so on, seeing how messed up it was what they were doing to the Israelites, and how they were even handling them and treating them, they felt bad, right? They wept, and they pondered and considered how, just a couple, just not too long ago, they were in good standing and they were good. And look, just like that, look at the situation they're in, right? The uncertain outcome of life. Anything can happen at any point. A multitude of gray-haired elderly men were being led away, bent over with age, meaning, they couldn't stand up straight because they were so old, their feet plodding along under the distress of a forced, swift march, with no consideration given to their age. So they gotta march at a certain pace. Doesn't matter how old they are, they fall down, they basically forced to get back up and just keep going. Young women who had just entered the bridal bedroom for their sharing of life, that is to, join in union with their husbands, or soon-to-be husbands, exchanged joy for weeping and sprinkled dust on their hair that was still wet with perfume. That sprinkling dust is a form of mourning. They were led away with their heads bare and began to sing a funeral song together in place of a wedding song, as they were roughly handled by the cruel treatment of a foreign nation. These captives were violently dragged away in public view to be put on board ship. Their husbands, in the prime of their youth, had ropes tied around their necks instead of festival garlands. They spent, that is basically, instead of the ornaments of the wedding and so on, this was more like being carried away as like slaves, being put on ships and then sent over there to Egypt to suffer that judgment. They spent the remaining days of their wedding festivities weeping rather than celebrating and enjoying youthful amusements, seeing the grave already yawning at their feet. They were meaning that death was close. They were driven like animals, constrained by the power of iron chains. Some were fastened by the neck to the ship's benches. Basically, when they were put on the ships, they were, whatever was tied around their neck was also tied to the benches. So they were basically just like stuck in place over there. Some were secured by their feet with unbreakable shackles. Moreover, they were plunged into total darkness due to thick planks positioned above them, so that they would receive the treatment due traders throughout their entire voyage. Right? This is basically kind of describing the conditions they were in when being sent there to Egypt. When these people had brought to the place called Scadia, which I believe is some part over there in Egypt. Let's take a look here. Yep, Egypt. Yeah, it's important. Ancient Egypt customs station, military post, and river port located southeast of Alexandria. So makes sense. Sounds about right. It says, and the voyage was finished, just as the king had decreed. Ptolemy ordered the captives to be encamped on the outskirts of the city in the racecourse. This stadium had been built with an immense perimeter and was very well placed for providing a public spectacle to all those returning home to the city and to those setting out from the city into the country for a trip abroad. The captives had no communication at all with the king's forces, nor were they considered worthy of the protection of the city wall. When this was done, the king heard that their fellow Jews were frequently going forth from the city in secret to express sympathy for the shameful misery of their kindred. So when they brought the captives, they didn't even bring them into the city, but you had certain Jews that would leave the city and go and sort of, try to comfort them. And when the king heard that, he became very angry and gave an order to deal with these people in exactly the same thorough fashion as the others. So, oh, you want to go and visit them? Now you're going to be shackled up and thrown and treated just like them, not leaving out any part of their punishment. The entire tribe was to be registered by name, no longer for the service of hard labor described earlier, but to be tortured with the prescribed punishments, and in the end, to be killed within a single day. So originally, they were brought to be basically a hardcore labor. But Ptolemy now says, you know what? Now just torture them and then kill them. So the process of drawing up a list of these people was carried out with cruel eagerness and intense diligence from the rising of the sun till its setting, coming to an end, though still incomplete after 40 days. So you had people that the ones that received this order, they were eager, they were excited. Yeah, hell yeah, we're gonna get this done. But there were so many Israelites that even after 40 days, they weren't able to record, as it says, the list of all these people. And okay, this person is going to get this, they're going to suffer this, they're going to suffer that. Filled with constant joy, the king organized banquets at the sites of all his idols. With a mind that had strayed far from the truth and with a polluted mouth, he praised objects that were deaf and unable to speak or give aid, that is, those idols. But he spoke improper words against the supreme God. At the end of 40 days, the clerks reported to the king that they were no longer able to complete the task of drawing up a list of all the Jews because of their countless numbers. So 40 days later, they come back, they say, look, it's too much. There's too many of them. We can't even create this list. Though the majority were still in the country, some still in their homes, and some even on site, the job had become impossible for all the generals in Egypt. After the king had threatened the clerks severely, claiming that they had accepted money to arrange a plan of escape, he came to be convinced when they explained and offered proof that both the paper supply and the reed pens that they were using had already run out. So he's like, look, the king first suspects. He said, no. Y'all just coming up with an excuse because you've been paid off and you're trying to help these Jews escape. And they're like, no, like literally, we don't even have enough resources to actually record this down. We don't have enough paper and pens and none of that. But this happened by the invincible providence of the one who was giving the Jews help from heaven. So this was done by the Lord, right? Because this was him starting to deliver, right, Israel from this cruel mind that Ptolemy had against them. And that brings us to the end of the book of 3rd Maccabees, the 4th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rechak Kudash. Until next time, Shalom.